everybody. I want to welcome you to another storytelling salon. This is part of our 100th year anniversary for the League of Women Voters of talking about the stories of the people involved in our league. Now, I am Vivian Hart. I am the president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson. So pleased to be with you today. Now, I bet everyone has heard a very familiar phrase, which is, what do women want? And it's asked with the question that we have no idea what women want. Well, this time we get to turn it around and we get to ask, what do the men want? These are the men in our league. Men make up about 10% of our league, and they do a great job in our league, I will tell you. Yes, we do. I would like to introduce the moderator of our panel, Joshua Polacek.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for coming. We are going to have about a 45 to 60-minute conversation where we're going to hear about the stories of men who have been involved and been helping the league a lot more than I have. My history is I was with the U.S. State Department for about 15 years, came back to Tucson for family reasons, and joined the league last summer. So I've really only been involved for a few months, but my colleagues here, Victor Bowleg, Rex Graham, Adrian Barton, and John Kaltsas, have been involved, I think, for a combined longer than I have been alive. So we won't get to an exact figure, but I'm pretty sure they've been members for decades with combined experience. So what we're going to do is first we're going to hear how their individual stories of how they got involved with the league, and then we're going to talk about some of the more interesting things that they've experienced over their decades, combined decades of experience with the league. So with that, Victor, I'd like to start with you. If you could just let us know, what brought you from teaching, it was civics, right, in Nogales? Or political science? Yeah, political science with PIMA in Nogales to being chair of the Voter Services Committee of the League of Women Voters. And then we can, we'll go back and explore your history a little bit, but I want to hear everybody's, how they first got involved with the league.
Okay, I got involved many years ago. I was teaching for Campbell Community College, but I also was working full-time for Superior Court as a family mediator. And I would teach, one evening a week in Nogales, so I'd make a drive down to Nogales, and I was teaching political science for PIMA at that time. And one of the things that I tried to do was to bring in speakers to sort of highlight and also educate the students, because this made it that much more impactful. So what I did is I contacted the League of Women Voters, made a phone call, and I asked for a speaker to be available. And at that time, Sally Davenport and Carol Scheer were both co-presidents. And, and amazingly, both of them made the trip to Nogales. My students were impressed that someone in Tucson, or people in Tucson, would actually care enough to drive all the way down. And they did a fantastic job of presenting and talking on the issues of politics, but also, women involvement. And we even explored with a student potentially of getting a student group started in Nogales, because, one of the things, I don't think there's a League of Women Voters branch in Nogales, and that's something that, maybe should be there. But we had a student that was really active, and she wanted to actually, try to get something started. But that was my initial involvement. And at that time, both Sally and Carol sort of pressed me about getting involved with the league or becoming a member, and I was like, no, I don't. It's for women. I don't want to get involved with the League of Women Voters. And they educated me on that, you know, it wasn't just for women, and that's something that I should explore. So they invited me to a meeting that I came to, and I saw that, you know, it was a challenging group, which, you know, excited me because they were a lot of them were former educators, and they were, you know, individuals who could actually teach me something, and I was open to that, and so I ended up joining the league. Carol sort of suggested I become a board member. I became a board member, and from there I became chair of voter services for many years, and got involved with putting on community forums, putting on workshops right here in this very room on how to moderate a forum. We went to South Tucson, to the library there. We did community workshops also. We got involved in voter registrations, you know, around the community. And that was something that allowed me now.
So to give people a sense, from the time they first came and spoke to your class in Nogales to the time you were on the board and chair of a committee, are we talking 6 weeks? Are we talking 6 months?
Well, it all blurs at this point because it was.
Week.
There's 6 weeks. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but it all blurred together, you know, because once you started getting involved and active, there was always something to do, and coming to the monthly meetings, you know, was one way to learn, but also then you find yourself getting some activity, or you're at the board, you have a board meeting to go to, and other information, so it all sort of blended in from there.
Great. So Rex, just to let people know, Rex is a much more experienced communicator than I am. He's got actual decades and not sort of a decade and a half behind his belt. Can you tell us what was your come to league moment? And you're one of the more recent league members here on the table.
Right, my come to the league moment.
Yeah.
It's kind of a blur like Victor's. I've been a member of the league for 2 years, and I had no intention of joining the League of Women Voters 2 years ago. But what motivated me to be in this stage right now is after the 2016 election, I noticed that the voter turnout was 55 and change percent. And I was just sort
of the registered voters, which is not eligible voters.
No, registered voters voted in the
Right.
2016 general election. I was kind of shocked.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I decided then that I was going to do something in my little tiny way about changing that. And so I was involved with through my church, with an interfaith organization, and I convinced them that we needed to register more voters. I thought that was the easiest, simplest thing to do. And well, when you want to register voters, there's a group in town that trains people how to register voters. So my path led me to the League of Women Voters. And they were excellent at training the church members and interfaith folks that I wanted to help register voters. And after a while, talking to these people at the League, the women, I just thought, my God, these are my people. And so I looked on their
And what
website.
specifically convinced you that they were your people?
Well, they were very knowledgeable. They're very articulate. They work together. They're collaborative. They're sort of bottom liners too. They want to get the job done, and just a very effective, efficient organization from top to bottom. And I thought that was great. Maybe there's a place for me, there. And so I checked the website. And I go, oh, men can join the league. So I filled out my application, and then I was invited to my first meeting, and soon after that I was helping out with voter registration, and then like Victor, I had my arm twisted to chair the Get Out the Vote committee, which is really near and dear to me. So that's sort of how I got involved. And I think for some men, you might think, well, it's all a women's organization, and it's true, but it's really not. it's really a civic political organization, and they don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. They want to register you, and they don't care if you're a man or a woman or non-binary. They don't care. They're interested in the democratic process, and I think that focus on what's right for increasing the participation in our democracy is what really sold me then and still motivates me today.
So I hopefully, because it's a little fresher in your mind, what was your timeline from looking for an organization to help out your church group to being conscripted onto the board?
Oh, the board took longer. I was involved in the Get Out the Vote campaign during the midterm election, so it was after that. So it was probably about a year after I was working on the board. But the league has, I call it the three-legged stool. They have advocacy where they try to change laws that further democracy. They register voters and get them out to vote, and they do voter education. And those three legs of the stool are really important to me too. So I got involved in all three of them, and so it was hard to split my time. I got the reputation for someone who could never say no.
That's why you're on the panel today.
And that's why I'm on the panel, and that's how I got on the board.
So let's go to Adrian. Can you tell us your experience? You may have had what I think it would be considered a more typical path to being an active league member.
Right, yeah, like I think most men get joined as part of a couple, and Judy was wanting to be active in
Your mouth needs to be closer.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, lean a little closer to the mic.
Yeah. Is that okay? How's that? So Judy joined us as a couple, and I started looking around, and there was a lot of activities that needed a little bit of muscle. So I had a pickup truck, and being able to help in that manner, moving tents around for different activities and moving furniture from the office and whatnot is how I've been involved for the most part. But I did go to the national convention in 2017.
Yeah, and we're going to hear some of those stories from 2017. So, John, you as well also, I believe, have a more typical path to the league.
My wife was in the league in 1976, and we had two little children, and she became very active in the league. And of course, when you have little children and more on the way, we had two more after that. I was the one who would stay behind and would care for the kids when my wife was off doing league activities. I would always be in the background. She would bounce ideas off of me. I remember there were times when she was doing political forum moderating, and she'd need to have directions or be taken to some strange suburban place that she didn't know about, and I was the one that had to take her. And pardon?
Illinois.
In Illinois. This was all in Illinois, yes. And there were times when I was worried about her. I think that one of the political forums she was at, one of the people that came to speak, a candidate, had a gun, and she had to disarm the man of the gun, or he couldn't participate in the forum. And so she'd come home with those kinds of stories, and then I was worried about whether or not she would be safe. But this has been a 40-some year journey that we've been on, 44-year journey. And I always was behind the scenes supporting her. When I came here, she volunteered me and put me on some committees. When I first got here, I was on the Education and Finance Study Committee for a couple of years. And I've done other things in helping to organize the men of the league. There's about 40 men in the Greater Tucson League. So those kinds of things. And I think that's as Adrian said, a very typical path for a husband of league members, especially longtime league members.
So Rex, you talked about the importance of voter registration, voter participation. And I know you have some interesting stories from when you were on the Get Out to Vote committee. Would you like to share some of those with us?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, the team, it was a big team, decided to focus on two areas of Tucson that really didn't turn out very well. I mean, the turnout in 2016 was low, but it's really low among young people, and there's some historically low turnout areas of Tucson. They're sort of in the south part of the city. And so our committee decided to focus on those two areas, and so we designed a sort of an easy peasy card to help people understand the easiest ways to register to vote and the easiest ways to vote. And we would say, you don't even have to go to the polls on election day. You can do it by mail. And believe it or not, a lot of people don't know that. And so we came up with these cards. And I remember this one, I wasn't there, but I was right next door, a restaurant. It was a Mexican restaurant on 22nd Street. And the volunteers went in and talked to the owner of the restaurant about how important it is to vote and to register to vote. And so she gathered all of her wait staff around her and said, this woman is from the League of Women Voters, and she's telling us how important it is to vote, not just to register, but also to vote. And we have these cards, and she passed out these cards explaining how easy it was. And every employee in that restaurant nodded their head, and I was really confident that they had gotten the message, not from me, but from somebody who they trusted and believed in. So that was really an important watershed moment for me.
So Victor, some people might not know your personal story, but you come from, originally, or from a country that has one of the highest voter participation rates in the world. And I remember when we were preparing for this, you used to tell me stories of being in Freeport, Bahamas, and watching the American election coverage and seeing, who were you seeing when you were watching those seminal debates of the 1960s?
Well,
who was running the debates?
Well, I don't know if it was the 60s, but what I do have a memory is watching debates and seeing the League of Women Voters involved. And that was one of the things that always, for some reason, you sort of look back at different points in your life or memories that you have and things that influenced or affected your life that at the time you had no idea would be of great influence. And that was one of the things that, looking back on my life, I realized that watching debates, I always heard about the League of Women Voters.
So when you say debates, listening, and you're in Freeport, Bahamas,
yes.
Which debates are you talking about?
I couldn't tell you.
No, but you're talking about the American presidential debates, yeah.
Right, thank you. It would be, yes, for the United States, not the Bahamas. Bahamas is 30 minutes from the U.S., so we get, ABC, NBC, CBS, and you get all the TV shows. So watching those debates and also, paying attention to it when there was, a presidential message, the TV screens went blank, and we got that automatically. We didn't have a Bahamian TV station at the time when I was growing up until probably I was a teenager, So I would say I already had an idea of who the League of Women Voters were or what they did. So when Carol and Shirley came to my class, there was already an image that I had. And when they asked me to join, and when I, originally said no, and when I decided to join, I already had an idea that this was an organization that was highly respected, that was influential, an organization also that was nonpartisan, and I tied into the work that I did as a mediator, because I've been through training to be neutral and to not take a specific side and working with disputes, and so that sort of tied into what I did as a person and made it an easy transition. But universally, I guess, people generally had an idea of the League of Women Voters, initially when they were involved with the U.S. presidential debates.
All right. So, Adrian, at the National Convention, it was 2017, right? What was, obviously 2016 was considered by many people a sort of seminal election in America. What was the mood at the National Convention the next year? And do you have any memories that really stick out from your time there?
Yeah, well, it was, So it was a high energy group for sure, and there was a lot of caucusing going on. And I don't remember all of the issues that they were talking about, but I know that diversity was high on the list. And of course, what amazed me about the convention is that when I showed up, it turns out that there are several male state presidents from like Oregon and maybe I forget where else. Judy might be able to tell me, but there was more than one, and it was which was fascinating to me that that a male would work his way up to that high level within a state league.
And you said there was this real energy going on.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you think people brought that energy in 2017?
Well, I think it was because of the previous election and because the voter turnout was could have been better, right? For both sides, really. But and it would have been, I guess, a less divisive race had that happened. So, just that's what I think.
So, John, you have a history as an educator, and what role do you see a nonpartisan organization like the League playing in this time of disinformation and sort of distrust of institutions? We're a 100-year-old organization. How do you think we reach people like in that story that Rex told in a restaurant in a diverse part of the city where a typical League member might stand out as unusual?
One of the things I admire most about the League is the League's education program. In this room on the third Saturday of every month, there are tremendous information programs that are made available to not only League members, but to anybody who is so interested. And then I know in more recent times you live stream these and you also post them on Facebook, so that's really a positive. One of the things I think is really important is to get young people involved in this early in their lives, and Running and Winning to me is an extremely good program where the League goes out to the local secondary schools, one every year, and actually encourages the young women in the school to consider politics as a career, and shows them by introducing them to political candidates or political office holders that here are women that have done this and you too can do that. So I mean, that's a very positive thing that they do. There's a lot of low information voting going on, and the more the League can promote education and have educational programs, I think the better off we all are as a result.
Can you remind, maybe not the people in the room, but maybe some people watching, why the League was founded 100 years ago and why we're celebrating our centenary right now?
Well, I mean, it came just a few months before the Equal Rights Amendment, but
not yet. We're still waiting for the Equal Rights Amendment.
I'm sorry, not equal rights, the right to vote, the women's right to vote.
Yeah, the 19th Amendment.
But the 19th Amendment, but that, as we've learned in education programs through the League, that was almost 150 years of working, even in Revolutionary War times, to try to get women involved and recognized as being viable to the political process. And so that was just a culmination of that, and of course it's been going on now 100 years, which everybody is proud of.
And so one of the concerns, I think, 100 years ago before the founding of the 19th Amendment was you talk about these low information voters, and there was all this obviously false propaganda being put out there that women would be the ultimate low information voter, and the League obviously has spent 100 years proving the exact opposite was true. Adrian, when you have been moving around, can you tell us some of the sort of concrete activities that you've experienced? You talk about setting up tents and stuff. Where are you setting up tents? What sort of things?
Okay, so any festival around town that is going to have a lot of folks, we usually set up a tent. And I'm not the only one that does it, but previously I had done. So, but I want to tell you a story about when Rex and I were canvassing down in a small strip mall in south of town. We went into this nail salon or whatever that was run by an Asian couple, and the old fellow was sitting at the table and whatnot. We went in to talk to him about voting, and he immediately told us the day, the election day, and that he was a naturalized citizen, and he was giving us the whole thing. So it was exciting to see that, that it's not just, born citizens are involved, and these natural born citizens may have more energy to vote than we do, right? I mean, but I just thought it was great.
And so you talk about, setting up a tent, tabling at these festivals. What sorts of things that, has the league been involved in, at these festivals?
Well, I think they
Are we just
register.
passing out
No,
pamphlets?
I think they register voters there, and of course, and they extend their voter education program as well, with the pamphlets and the directories for the elected officials and things like that. So, and I guess it's also a way of getting the league name out there, right? Because there are a lot of folks that may not know the league,
Yeah.
right?
So Victor, when you were head of voter education, can you tell us a couple of stories that really stuck out in your mind at how you think the league's efforts, changed what the voters might have been doing, or really opened the eyes of the people that you were reaching out to?
I don't have one specific example, but I do know, when we did voter registration, maybe at the rodeo grounds, maybe at an event on the south side or another part of town. I think what was important too is the community seeing faces that sort of represented them. And that made it easier sort of to approach people and say, hey, are you registered to vote? Because sometimes people would just ignore that, and anybody who's done voter registration has seen people walk right past them as if they didn't say a thing, and it just made it easier to sort of approach people. I know I had, can't think of a woman who was on the voter services committee. One of the things, we would set up a table, and we would have information for people to register to vote. But one of the things that she did is she went out into whatever event there was, and she would bring back a team of people who expressed interest in registering to vote. And we would give them the information, answer any questions they wanted to. So, what that taught me is you can't just be passive and set up a table. You also have to filter out, or have a couple of volunteers with you to filter out into the event or the community to sort of bring people, to the table, because a lot of times people will be intimidated. They'd be intimidated based on knowledge, they'd be intimidated based on assumptions, they'd be intimidated, assuming this was something that it wasn't, or it was politically affiliated or what have you. So, being able to go and reach people, I think, is really the important thing, and having a team that's sort of diverse, that's sort of being able to approach a variety of people.
So this is a question for both you and for John. Do you think the work of the league has gotten more difficult since the 80s or 90s in the last sort of 15 to 20 years?
Well, I think right now people are pretty much upset with the way things are, and so it makes it, and so now I think young people also understand the importance of voting, or why it's important, or when you make that pitch to them. So I think that people right now have an issue with the way things are politically, or things they've heard, or they understand that my vote does count, or I can make a difference.
So you're suggesting you think it's gotten easier to reach the younger folks now?
I don't know if it's, I wouldn't say easier, I would say it makes it easier for people to understand how it impacts them.
Excellent. So they're more open to being approached. You still have to go do the hard work, but now they're more open to hearing it.
They understand why they need to vote.
Okay. And I'm curious, from your experience both in Illinois and Arizona.
I was going to say that I think some of this is geographical and regional. In Illinois, as I remember, one of the biggest things that we could do for the local electorate, who probably were in high percentages registered, was we did education programs and a lot of forums and candidate debates. And that was, we were my wife was at least very consumed with bringing to the public, a good display of who it is that's running and what their issues are, so that people could discern, who would be maybe the best person for them to vote for. That was there. Here, of course, we have much more activity along the lines of voter suppression. And
well, the league's not involved in voter suppression.
No, but the political,
as far as I know,
the political winds are here much more into voter suppression.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I noticed that is different here is that the league has to continually take positions that would work against any type of activity on the part of local organizations or politicians or the legislature to stop the suppression that people would like to see happen. And so I think if you go through all the states, I bet you each one has their own local political issues, depending on what the community is like and what the issues are in that local community. Where we lived in northern Illinois, in a somewhat more affluent area, that suppression wasn't an issue. Everybody had the right to vote. It was like, could we get these people to understand the difference in candidates so they can make an intelligent choice?
Mm-hmm. And so, what do you see? What was there something that really stood out to you geographically once you came to Arizona? The sorts of work, something, a particular experience that you had that brought this to the forefront?
In all honesty, one of my very first activities here was to be on the Education Finance Study Committee. The Education Finance Study Committee consisted of, maybe 10, 12 league members, and we were looking at, the ways the state funded education. I was an educator in a very highly successful school district, in a very well-heeled school district in suburban Chicago. We had superb education, superb salaries, and superb results. We had 94% of the kids in our school district going on to college, and probably to some of the finest colleges in the country, and the other ones were probably going off to the military or to a trade school. And so I think I've seen really in my lifetime, as 50 years in education, sort of the best of what can be in education. When I tried to introduce some of those ideas in local league committees, I was told, we don't do things like that here, which was to me very discouraging. So I find sometimes that people in one region are not open to successful ideas from another region, and that is something that I wish would be improved.
Yeah. So Rex, you spent your career in various parts of the country before settling in Arizona, sort of retiring into this very full-time work. What do you see as different and specific to Southern Arizona versus the other places you've done political type work?
Well, one of the things, when I first drove to Arizona, the first thing I noticed was my skin dried out. Just driving here. But what's really changed for me, and I'll sort of reflect what John said too, is the political parties that have become so polarized. It's really changed the way people think about voting and how they think about being educated. And one of the issues is disinformation. So we can do all we can to inform voters, but there's this huge disinformation campaigns going on in the background. And so I think one of the things that League has done is they actually had a forum on how to be an informed voter in the post-truth era. And that's a pretty controversial title, but I think it just sort of epitomizes why the League and nonpartisan groups like the League are so important, because there's biased information on both sides of any argument, and The league is really trying to go right down the middle and say, well, this is what we know is true and factual.
So I'll stop you there. So we hear this, going right down the middle, but
Yeah.
really what the league is trying to do is get to the truth, right? Make sure that the voters are informed on the truth, and whether that truth happens to be more closely on one side of the partisan divide or the other, the league ignores that partisan middle and tries to get right to the truth.
Right. There's no truth test that we can give the candidates. But
Not yet.
what the league, not yet. What the league tries to do is they get voices on all sides, and so by listening to a variety of voices, you can synthesize what the truth probably is. And when you get people to sit down on the same panel, like we're sitting down here, on different sides of an argument, the debate evolves, and when you watch it, you can get a better appreciation and understanding for really exaggeration and what's really reliable. And so that's one really important function of the voter education programs, is doing that for a variety of issues. One of the voter education programs that shocked me was one on the Corporation Commission. And that's in Arizona. It's like the fourth branch of government. They're sort of off by themselves, and they set rates for electricity and water around the state. It's a really important body. And there was a utility company in Phoenix that was really contributing so much to the candidates running for that commission that it was questioning the reliability of the decisions of that corporation commission. And by having former corporation commissioners, utility company representatives on the same stage talking about it and facing the points of view of both sides, I thought that was just a really effective way of informing all voters about how important that is. And that's just one of many examples of how I was impressed, just to hear it, but also thankful to be part of such a great organization.
So I'm going to throw one more question out that I'll ask each of the four of you to answer, and then we'll take a few questions from the audience and wrap up. So this is a planted question from the audience, is what advice would you give to other men considering becoming active in the League of Women Voters? And I'll start with Adrian.
Okay. Well, so as with any organization of volunteers, there's a lot of different things that you can do. So you need to find out what your interest is. So I just like helping people. So if a group needs help doing things like just cleaning up after an activity, I'm more than happy to do that. And of course, my main objective is just to support my wife and her journey through the league. So I think if I were to advise any new male members, just find something that you like to do and join that group. You'll enjoy it.
So what I'm hearing from you is pitch in, move chairs, pull cable, whatever is needed.
Yeah, find out what you can, where you can help.
Thank you, John.
From my experience in being on a committee, I would say one of the best things to do is maybe join on some committee or a study where you're actually going to meet on an ongoing basis and really get to know people. I think you get connected to an organization through personal relationships, and personal relationships build as a result of working on projects together, especially in small groups. So my advice to men who would be thinking about being in the league would be to talk with the person who has helped you join and find out all the studies and the subcommittees that are going on in the league and join one or two and actually start delving into an issue or a problem and meet the people that are involved in that, and those people will lead you to others. And at least that's what's happened to my wife and I. When we came here, we did not know anyone in Tucson. And we've been here now 6 years, and we know lots of people, and the league is one of the main reasons we know a lot of people.
So here it sounds like join committees to meet people.
Yep.
Victor.
I mean, the advice I would give is really to come with an open mind. If you're an individual that's not threatened about being around women and women in leadership positions, then this is the group for you, because this is an opportunity to learn. One of the things that I found is just talking to each member. They have such rich backgrounds and so much history, education, things they've accomplished, the things you can learn from, and I'd say it's probably the most active group that I've been a part of, whereas it isn't just talk, it's sort of like we're going to accomplish A, B, and C, and we're going to get things done. So great group to be a part of, great group to be active in, and just be prepared for the challenge.
So it sounds like you're saying be open to learning and don't be afraid of women.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't be intimidated.
Yeah.
Don't be intimidated by women in leadership positions.
Mr. Graham.
I would agree with Victor. I grew up in a family of 6 sisters and a strong-willed mother, and they were not afraid to tell me what they thought. And so the league was like home. But the league is surrounded by just incredible men and mostly women, and a lot of them have had careers much more distinguished than anybody on this panel. And I think it's just a great learning opportunity. I have certainly learned a lot about politics, about leadership, and about listening, and like the other panelists said, is just doing what you can do and picking your niche and rolling up your sleeves. And when you're I've always felt that in these meetings you talk about some really important issues. And I guess I've never looked at the people across the table as women. And I don't think they look across the table necessarily, maybe they do, and won't see me as a man. It's just that we have the issues are more important than the sex of the people sitting around that table. And I've always felt that was why they were there and why I felt so comfortable being with them.
And I suppose I shouldn't give you a forum to say this, but you have you've always had this proposal for rebranding the league. Do you want to throw it out there and see how many votes you can get in this room?
Yeah, all the women in the audience are probably cringing right now. But I think men have really benefited from the league and vice versa. The league, it's 100 years old. And in 1974, they admitted men as full-fledged members. And I think since that time, men and women have really learned how to work together in this sphere where voting is important, democracy is important, and I think that after a while, when you're in the league, those gender boundaries really kind of disappear. And so I think that there's been talk over the years of changing the name of the League of Women Voters to the League of American Voters, or something less specific. And I can see the arguments on both sides of that. I think for me growing up, the League of Women Voters meant something to me. It meant something to my family. It meant something to Victor when he was watching those debates in the Bahamas. And so, I wonder about that. As a man, you think, well, you're not represented in that name, League of Women Voters, but at the same time, it's such a great name and has such history that I think it's probably more valuable to retain it. I really do not struggle with that, so I think that's sort of where I've come down.
Well, I want to thank all 4 of you for coming today and sharing your stories. We have about 5 minutes or so to take 2 minutes or so to take some questions from the audience. So go ahead.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, can I stand up because I have a thin voice? Oh, come on, guys. It must not be that easy to be with all these women. We have tried over the years. In fact, I remember we thought that buying these T-shirts, League of Women Voters, not for women only, would do it, right, when you're out there and registering voters. So what I would like to know is, what is the most difficult thing? Now, we would like to get a lot more men, and we're into diversity, and you're a minority, face it. So I would really love to know, what is your most uncomfortable? You all sound pretty comfortable, but there are a lot of men out there that probably wouldn't. What's most difficult about that for you? What do you find? Are you constantly, because we got gender issues out there in the polity, and you must be feeling sensitive about how we're coming across. What is it like to be in?
Well, I think I'm going to take a point of privilege as a moderator. I was, in my last diplomatic posting, I was the ambassador's senior advisor for public affairs, and I remember sitting in what we called the bubble, this classified room that had an airlock that allowed you to have top secret and above conversations about all sorts of issues. And there's a weekly senior management meeting called Country Team, where you have representatives from all the different parts of the US government that have interest in Jamaica. And I'm sitting there, and as the ambassador's left-hand man and the deputy ambassador as the right-hand man, and we go around the table, and the only woman around the table of about 14 senior U.S. government officials is the head of the U.S. Agency for International Development. And I've seen that experience, unfortunately, too many times in my 15-year career in the Foreign Service, even when I worked in the Office of Global Women's Issues, and I was a Middle East advisor, and I would go to committee meetings on Middle East issues and be the only person raising women's issues, and generally also, you know, in a room full of men. And so for me, I think the humility and the empathy that I've learned from those situations, and just how shocking it is that, you know, it's 2020 and the senior reaches of many organizations are still whatever that was, 14 to 1 male, or you know, 2 to 1 male. So, you know, I just think you just need to accept, you know, a little humility that you go through. And I think the difficulty that the league has right now isn't just an issue of gender, but also an issue reaching out to that next generation and getting people to understand, people mean men and women and everyone in between, that the 19th Amendment is within living memory, right? And the other vote, you know, and the Civil Rights Act is not just within, you know, living memory, but it's, you know, it's within my cousin's memories, and my parents fought for those sorts of things. And so these issues are still very live in America, and communicating that to the next generation of men and women, I think, will be important for the second centennial of the league.
We're here
So
listening.
I'd like to address Sally's
Yeah,
question.
but Rex does have
Women help to make it more comfortable, I guess that's what I'm
Well,
saying. It's a two-way street.
Right, so Sally's question was about how men can feel more comfortable in the league, I think surrounded by women.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that the bigger question is, how can the society of men feel comfortable around women leaders? Because now we're having many more women elected to the Senate and the House of Representatives at national level. State houses are often shifting from male to female. Tucson has the first female Hispanic mayor in its history, and we still haven't broken through to that glass, the ultimate glass ceiling. But I think all men need to be comfortable with being in the room with women and being in the room with women leaders, because if we don't, we're just not gonna. This country isn't benefiting from all that talent, all that wisdom that's out there. And so it's important for me as a member of the league, but I would say it's more important for women or for men on the outside to regard women ascending to positions of power in our society and in business and in government.
And Sally, I would give you an answer that is much more practical. And the more practical one, probably what you're looking for. When Judy Wood was president about a year and a half ago, she asked me and Adrian if we would try to assemble the men. And they arranged an 8 a.m. breakfast at a restaurant in Midtown. And we had 3 other men show up besides Adrian and I. So the guys sat around for 2 hours. We did have breakfast, and we talked about what it was like. We didn't know each other. We had to get to know each other and what it was like to be in the league. And they all said, whose idea was this to have breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning? This is bogus. We need to go to a bar in the evening. And it would be a much better place for men to meet. And so we arranged to have a meeting in a bar about 4 or 5 months later. and we at least got about 10 or 12 men. So I think very practically, don't think in your gender terms of how you would meet, but if you want more men involved, how would men meet? And I think that would help.
So I think we have time for one more question, 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up at 3 o'clock. Go ahead. On the right, my right.
Emily.
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 Well, I'm pretty new to the league and learning a lot about history and activities and what goes on. But thinking from what was said about what could you men do, and my understanding of the running and winning program is for targeted for younger women. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I was thinking that you gentlemen thinking about activities that you could do to attract males is maybe something similar to that. An activity where you go out to the, what is it, that middle school or high school?
High school.
High school. Because you have to be 18 to vote. So I'm thinking, I hear a lot on the radio about young people 17 or close to 18, even here locally, who are interested now because I think they didn't realize that there could be a pathway, we'll say, to registering to vote and to vote. So with the programs of education that the league does, I'm thinking guys can maybe start a program similar to that to the young males in the city.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things, when I'm on the board, I think I'm going to raise. I have also been, co-opted onto the board. Mine was about 6 months, where I think there's an opportunity, much like we do at naturalization ceremonies, where we could do similar things at high school graduations. And have that, tabling at high school graduations as part of you're 18 or you're about to be 18, because I understand you can register if you're 17, if you're going to be 18 before the next election. That's in Arizona, that's the rule, right?
Right.
That was the rule in 1997 when I registered, right before I turned 18. And so, yeah, I think there's that opportunity. On the run to win, though, I would say, because I was a Boise State alumni, that you don't really, and I think we see it, at state and national politics, you don't really need to encourage men to think that they're already ready to run the world. When I did Boise State, there were about 550 Boise Staters, and there were only about 180 Girl Staters. And there's opportunity, the American Legion has the money to do 1-for-1, and they just can't get enough girls to participate. I think there are opportunities for men to do things like, maybe we should be going out to the football teams and being like, as you're getting the football teams involved in getting people registered to vote, making it a civic duty that's can be wrapped up into, say, athletics or things like that.
But I don't want to lose sight of the reason, for running and winning. It's important because, young women have been oppressed historically, and so we don't want to lose sight of that and also suppressed. And so that's a group that needs to see women in positions of power, women in positions of authority, and to sort of be able to understand that they can also reach a certain level. So typically we see males in society who don't need that as much because we have tons of models, around us. Not as many people of color, but we do need to see address issues for young girls and their self-esteem, to also see women in positions of power. So that, I think, is critical and of the utmost importance than everything else after that.
Yeah, and I do think the next year for the high school program, it would probably be useful to have maybe somebody from this panel participate, because I think it's encouraging to see an older male role model encouraging young women to get involved and to have that suggestion that this encouragement of belief.
Maybe more important too than having those men is is it's not just men and women and white men and white women. It's I think the League of Women Voters nationally and even more importantly locally has really made a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that broadens the appeal of the League to all kinds of groups, not just men, you know, high school or high school age men, but people all over the map. We have a very diverse population in Arizona and Tucson, and it's important to continue what the League is doing to reach out to all those different communities that we don't think of every day, and to broaden the appeal of not necessarily joining the League, but the message of the League of service and education and fairness.
In my years of being a high school educator, my experience is that almost all the schools that I worked in and seen the student leadership, women dominate at the high school level in student leadership. Young men are very reticent to get involved, and frankly, they don't get really involved until the latter years of college when they decide, I better do something for my resume, and then all of a sudden they want to get into a tangle with a woman to run for an office within the university so that they can have something put on their resume. So thinking of this in a more feminist kind of way rather than either or, I would say a program like Running and Winning should be both and. And both and in terms of, have some men come to that, young men come to that presentation, and some young women. You can help the young men understand the importance of women being leaders, but also encourage them to know that there's a place in politics and government for them. And I think it would be a winning activity to include both.
So, last question.
Yes, thank you. Well, I need to tell you, I'm Frida Johnson, and my son Aaron, and my daughter Ruth, so I have one of each gender. But my son, who comes over to have supper with me on Monday nights, and we play Scrabble, and he's devilishly good, and sometimes I beat him. So he brought up, we visit about stuff, and he just said, well, I saw this thing about the League of Women Voters. So he watched the streamcast of the program about, that was just issued by the League.
Guns?
And he was explaining it all to me. And I've been president of the League. I've been a loyal member for over 40 years. And I'm just here to tell you, I'm so touched that my son chooses to tell me something about what great work the League of Voters does.
Cool.
Okay?
Very nice.
I can only ask this question because one of the bald heads is mine.
Okay.
But is being bald a criteria for our panel to join the League as a man?
I can answer.
Well, except for the moderator.
Right.
Who may in a few years be bald, who knows?
Not according to my mother's father.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it's 80% of the application criteria for men. But if the other 20% is impressive enough, then they'll let you in. But you're guaranteed to go if you're bald.
You have to wear
Can we
gray.
get some t-shirts? Yeah.
Right.
We need to get those t-shirts out.
Yes.
That's right.
I would have been happy to have us all wear those t-shirts had I been told about them beforehand. Anyways, with that, we do have to wrap up, and I want to thank everyone for coming, everyone who's watching online or who may be watching this in the future online. And I want to encourage everyone who is potentially watching online to go to the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson, figure out how to get involved. And I especially encourage people under 35 to do it. It's a way that you can help save and preserve the democratic nature of our republic for future generations and for your generation. So with that, thank you.